For the most part, it's pretty easy to figure out whether a movie is going to be critically and/or commercially successful pre-release. By looking at any movie's marketing or lack thereof and social media buzz, you might start to glean a clear picture of the general temperature in the room and make predictions accordingly. So with that in mind, both good and bad, here are 10 movies you were totally wrong about. Number 10, Jamanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Let's kick things off with a film that was categorically underestimated by basically everyone from the moment that it was announced, of course, myself included. Many were initially upset that the third Jamanji film, Jamanji Welcome to the Jungle, was revealed to be in development barely a year after the passing of original star Robin Williams, and the addition of an A-list cast including Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Kevin Hart, and Karen Gillan didn't help move the needle much. Now, this cynicism was certainly justified to an extent. I mean, it wasn't exactly easy to believe that director Jake Kasdan, fresh off of helming the terrible comedy Sex Tape, would deliver a quality blockbuster without any big budget tentpoles under his belt. The marketing as well sold Jumanji as an aggressively broad action-adventure film, and releasing a mere 5 days after Star Wars The Last Jedi, the writing seemed to be on the wall for a critical and commercial dud. But talk about a movie that surpassed any and all pre-release predictions. Jumanji not only racked up an impressive 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, but went on to gross a mind-boggling $962 million. Given that many were unconvinced that the $150 million movie would gross even half of its final gross, it's easily one of the most unfathomable box office results in recent times. Number 9, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. While it's fair to say that Zack Snyder is a relatively hit-and-miss filmmaker, the marketing for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, well, bar the announcement of its title, did do an absolutely stunning job of casting those doubts aside. The absurdly epic trailers did one of the hardest sells in cinema history, focusing on the wish fulfillment of finally getting to see Batman and Superman go to war. It was enough that even the most cynical of comic book fans must have confessed to being at least a little bit excited, no matter Snyder's penchant for excess. And in the very least, it did feel like Batman v Superman would be the DC Extended Universe's answer to the Avengers, a box office phenomenon that would easily crack 1 billion worldwide and could even go far beyond that. However, DC fans will long remember the day when the review embargo lifted for the movie, revealing a depressing number of critical pans before it settled at a tragic 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the mixed word of mouth from even hardcore fans ensured that Batman v Superman's box office fell off a cliff in its second weekend, suffering a historically bad drop which led to the film grossing only $873 million worldwide. Now that might sound like a lot, just a little bit shy of Jamanji in fact, but you have to keep in mind that Warner Brothers invested $300 million into the production alone without even including marketing, so it's safe to say that they were expecting a much better commercial performance. And come on, a film in which Batman fights Superman should have easily made $1 billion minimum, and while it does have its fans to this day, it wasn't the Spider-Man No Way Home or Avengers that it should have been. Number 8, Smile. Smile was a film that, on the basis of its marketing alone, looked like another trashy, low-effort Blumhouse knockoff. Basically, a lazy attempt to imitate the immense box office success of 2018's critically reviled Blumhouse horror, Truth or Dare. And given the enduring success of horror films throughout the pandemic, it seemed likely that Smile, which was originally planned for a streaming debut, would easily recoup its $17 million budget. But even then, the most serious forecasters all had their projections in the realm of around $50 to $60 million. A solid return on investment, no doubt, but not a box office smash by any means. To the surprise of just about everyone though, Smile received strongly positive reviews from critics who lauded its atmosphere, scares, and lead performance. In turn, ensuring that it wasn't merely undemanding teenagers and die-hard horror fans who turned out for it. And ultimately, Smile grossed a stonking $216 million globally, more than 12-fold its budget, making it one of the highest-grossing horror films ever, while raking in more than higher-profile recent films like Nope, The Black Phone, Scream, Halloween Ends, and The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. So yeah, what an absolutely ridiculous result for a film that was almost dumped on Paramount+. Number 7, Solo: A Star Wars Story. If there's one movie property that seemed absolutely bulletproof in the commercial stakes, it was surely Star Wars. And while most observers pegged Solo, a Star Wars story, to turn an easy profit of, say, 700 to 800 million, expectations were considerably lower for its critical reception, given the film's catastrophic production issues, namely Ron Howard being drafted in to reshoot 70% of it. Yet this is a movie where most people actually got things totally backwards, as ultimately Solo was decently reviewed by the press, scoring a solid 69%, which many deemed a pleasant surprise after so much behind-the-scenes turmoil. But its box office performance was another story entirely, as Solo ended up falling just shy of $400 million globally, which, considering its massive $275 to $300 million budget, made it the first box office bomb of the legendary sci-fi franchise. While many had doubts about Solo's quality pre-release, it just seemed like a sure thing that the casuals would come out and force to see it, no pun intended. Yet, releasing mere months after the polarizing The Last Jedi, while offering up an origin story that few people were asking for, it was apparently enough to keep people away, ironically, despite it being pretty good. Number 6. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's safe to say that Marvel's Phase 4 was underwhelming. Part of that was definitely thanks to a jumbled release date and creative overhauls due to the effects of the COVID pandemic, but a lot of it was simply down to Marvel releasing a lot of bland movies that, to many people, didn't feel like significant steps forward for the overall story. Black Widow was an all-too-late solo movie, while later flicks like Thor: Love and Thunder failed to live up to the momentum of previous franchise installments. However, none quite deflated fans like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. In this case, though, it was definitely partly down to us fans imagining a movie that was never being made. See, in the run-up to this release, there was the feeling that we were going to get an MCU installment with the same weight as the Avengers on No Way Home. Something that would capitalize on the multiverse concept with insane cameos, alternate versions of our favorite heroes, and a huge leap forward for the franchise whole storytelling. And this feeling only doubled when Professor X from the Fox movies was teased in the first trailer. Like, could we finally get the first confirmation of mutants in this universe, and who else did the filmmakers have up their sleeve? Well, it turns out, kinda no one. While definitely a fun, enjoyable movie, don't get me wrong, this was not the storytelling milestone most were anticipating. While almost all of the big cameos were themselves spoiled in the trailers and ultimately meant nothing to the overall story as they were multiverse gimmicks expended without any real consequence. Number 5. Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. It might sound ridiculous now, but if you're old enough to remember the buzz, or lack thereof, surrounding the release of Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl, you'll also recall the collective surprise at just how perversely successful it was. Any movie based on a theme park ride was always going to get its fair share of eye rolls from the general public, and nothing says creative bankruptcy quite like Disney making a film loosely based on one of their own attractions. And it didn't help that most of Disney's top brass didn't have much confidence in it either. And as Pirates' release date approached, it seemed like the film was destined to be a Waterworld tier critical and commercial disaster. But Pirates was ultimately warmly embraced by critics and audiences alike, scoring 80% on Rotten Tomatoes and grossing $654 million worldwide, and even netted Johnny Depp a Best Actor Oscar nomination, while also scoring 4 other nods in technical categories. It was an unfathomable result even mere weeks from the film's release, and led to a 5-film franchise of movies that have collectively grossed over $4.5 billion worldwide, albeit amidst wildly mixed reviews. Number 4. John Wick. In 2014, it can't be understated that Keanu Reeves' career as a leading man was absolutely on the skids. He had a slew of critical and box office duds in his rearview mirror, most notably 47 Ronin from the year before. And when the first trailer for John Wick dropped, it was met with pretty much laughter from many moviegoers, who felt that it would be impossible to take an action film seriously in which Reeves attempts to avenge his murdered dog. Most assumed that it was going to be nothing more than a straight-to-video bland actioner that everyone would forget in 6 months' time. And while that's shocking to think now, given Reeves' track record at the time, the less than stellar histories of those involved, and the lackluster marketing, it wasn't a particularly unfair assessment. But John Wick, of course, opened to Reeves' strongest reviews in years, nabbing a mighty 86% score with critics, and amid strong word of mouth, doubled projections for its opening weekend box office haul. Ultimately, a film that many had already written off as a flop, grossed $86 million, kickstarting a franchise of acclaimed films which have, to date, netted almost $600 million worldwide. Furthermore, John Wick is largely credited with Reeves' wider career comeback and greater visibility in pop culture ever since. So yeah, this is certainly a case where most people were very, very happy to be wrong. Number 3, The Monuments Men. The Monuments Men is one of those films that just had glory written all over it. An adaptation of a fascinating slice of untold history from World War II, directed and co-written by George Clooney, and boasting an insane ensemble cast that also included Matt Damon, Bill Murray, John Goodman, and Cate Blanchett. It seemed like a no-brainer victory. And prior to release, this was pegged as a major threat for the 2015 Oscars, even with the somewhat suspicious February release date. It wasn't unreasonable to expect like 90% of the tomato meter, $250 million at the box office, and a slew of Oscar nominations. But The Monuments Men remains one of the most baffling prestige misses of the last decade. Despite so many appealing elements, Clooney's film sank like a stone with critics, grossed just $155 million against a $91 million budget, and didn't receive a single solitary Oscar nomination, not even for its costumes or production design, of which were pretty damn good. All of this felt like a given, a can't-miss success before release, but it was instead rejected en masse. Number 2, Avatar: The Way of Water. The discourse leading up to the release of Avatar: The Way of Water was nothing short of fascinating. Even though Avatar is the highest grossing film of all time, many have since cited its lack of apparent cultural impact in the decade plus since, and so cast doubt on James Cameron managing to lure audiences back for a second go-round. With 13 years since the last movie and audience appetites having changed substantially since, industry analysts and film fans alike expected Avatar 2 to turn a more modest profit than its predecessor, perhaps just breaking $1 billion at the box office. But it bears repeating again, don't bet against James Cameron. And that's because at the time of press, The Way of Water is closing in on $2.2 billion worldwide, which will see it overtake Titanic to become the 3rd highest grossing film of all time, behind the original Avatar and Avengers Endgame. It's an astonishing result for any film, but a 13 years later sequel to a movie which generated mixed responses from many and hasn't made much of a perceived cultural footprint, it's practically miraculous. Number 1, Transcendence. Leading up to its 2014 release, there was considerable hype for Transcendence, the directorial debut of cinematographer Wally Pfister, best known for his 4 collaborations with Christopher Nolan, including his Oscar-winning work on Inception. Pfister's clear technical precision as a cinematographer made him seem like a natural fit to helm a blockbuster production, especially with Nolan himself serving as executive producer, while the script lured in a cast of A-listers, including Johnny Depp, Morgan Freeman, Rebecca Hall, Kate Mara, Cillian Murphy, and Paul Bettany. Backed by some terrific trailers, there wasn't any reason to expect anything less than good to great reviews and a healthy box office performance, only for Transcendence to fall massively short on both counts. Pfister's film scored just 19% on the tomato meter, with most criticism leveled at the script, while a brutal C+ cinema score ensured that it had no staying power at the box office either. Ultimately, it grossed an atrocious $103 million against a $150 million budget, making it a major bomb before we even got to marketing costs. And sadly, Pfister hasn't directed any other films since.